and we'll go ahead and cast some StarCraft. How's that sound? Sounds good to me. Sound good to you? All right. Spawning in the upper left-hand corner of Oceanborn, we have our Basilisk North American Protoss, Trigger. His opponent in the lower right-hand corner, in the blue, for Psystorm, it's Gerald. I unfortunately had to work this morning, so I wasn't able to cast EPT EU, but I ran home, booked it from work so that I could make sure to catch NA, and lucky us, got kind of a banger PvP for round 1. This should be really, really fun. Trigger is sometimes a little bit non-standard, I would say. He likes to think about the game, play a little outside the box. I feel like Gerald is, generally speaking, a solid macro player. And, I mean, he's just overall a strong Protoss. But this is PvP. Things can get spicy. And as we're seeing, both players are going to drop proxy pylons in identical positions on opposite sides of the map, which is a beautiful thing. This is a fun thing about new maps, too, is that there's, like, those positions where people see and they're like, okay, this is the good position. And we start seeing proxies in that location every game, but then players start scouting there all the time. Suddenly the proxies aren't as good anymore. Ooh, that was not what I expected out of Trigger, going for the Robo. So we have a proxy Stargate from Gerald versus the proxy Robo of Trigger. This can work out in a couple of different ways. It largely depends on if Gerald's Oracle or Oracles can just kill everything. Then Gerald, I think, should be in the better position, but Trigger's going to have a stronger army, a little more versatility with that army. With this Robo positioning, it's almost certainly going to be Prism as a priority. So it's kind of interesting, though. Very intrigued by this Robo position. This makes a lot of sense for a Stargate to me. Just proximity-wise. Gerald checking things out, sending some units out. Oh, and he's going to find it. He is going to find this Robo. That is a crucial scout here for Gerald as these Adepts head across the map. And the second Oracle starts up. The first one is just chilling, so it is going to be double Oracle heading in as the Adepts try to break through, but that is a full gateway wall. Trigger dropping the third gate in that wall. Says, no, no, no. The Adept will kill this Pro, but the two Adepts can kill the one Adept. And that's a nice little start for Gerald in the army fight. Oh, can he actually get that? Oh my god, it gets out of there. Stalkers and Immortals are up the ramp already. Recall to get those Adepts home because there's not a lot of units here for Gerald. Warp Gate is about to finish, but it's not done yet. Oh my god, can he kill both of these pylons in time? He's going to go for it. He's going to go for it. Oh, he decides to fight against the units and the probes instead. The Prism is here, though, so a lot of probes can start to go down. Of course, the double Oracle is going to head across the map as well. Right now, Trigger is doing it fantastically. He's in such a great position. But, oh my god, he's got 3 Stalkers back at home. Trigger, you absolute mad lad. Just here with the triple Stalker. And if he kills one of these Oracles, the second one is basically useless. 2 probes. And while Gerald does push the Prism away with the 2 Stalkers and the Immortal in there. I mean, this is very good for Trigger now. Gerald is on 13 probes to the 21 of Trigger. The only issue Trigger has is he is fully walled in, which means there's no easy way for him to, like, expand out of this. Because right now, if Trigger dropped a base, oh, dude, he'd be chilling so hard. But he basically can't, unless he brings the Prism back. I guess he could bring the Prism back and utilize that. But he also needs the Contain here, at the very least. Gerald's going to drop a nice little force field, but oh, man. The double Immortal is just so good. The lift here from Gerald is really nice. That Phoenix really coming into play. And that Immortal's going to get targeted down. It does get saved, though, at 2 hit points. Super Shield Battery turned on. One of the Immortals goes down, but more Stalkers getting warped in. The Phoenix working on that Prism, but it goes down. The Oracle coming in to help as well, but that will fall too. And this Shield Battery overcharge is about to end. The Prism's going to die, though. There's no escape for these units. Trigger is, I mean, he's extremely committed, but look at how far ahead he is. Even if Gerald cleans up all of these units, and I don't know if that's a guarantee, Trigger just has so much more behind this. He's got an economy. There's nothing left for Gerald. He is on 5 probes. So these Stalkers are going to have to run away, but yeah, Gerald is just going to tap out. He realizes what kind of position he's in, and Trigger takes game number 1. Gee. I wish Twitch would work. That would be very nice. I'd be a big fan of that. Seems to be having some issues here. I don't know if that's just me. All right, well, we're getting into game number 2. Nobody needs to know what series we're in right now. Doesn't need to be in the title. They got to click first to figure it out. But if you're watching already, you already know. And we're in game number 2 here. Spawning in the lower left-hand corner of Alcyon, we have our now red Protoss for Sizestorm Gaming, Gerald. His opponent in the upper left-hand corner is, of course, Basilisk's Trigger. Looking solid there in game number 1. Of course, you can make good moves, but sometimes the build orders work out for you. And in that game, the Robo was just hitting before the double Oracle hit. Got there with the Immortal and the Stalkers. The Prism showed up. He's able to get a lot of work done. And, you know, I don't think he scouted that Stargate, but he was certainly prepared for it with 3 Stalkers and a Shield Battery back at home. So maybe some luck of the draw there. And PvP often has some luck involved. It's a very strategy-based matchup, and sometimes you take a risk and it does not pay off. But also, there's a lot of skill involved, and sometimes a big part of your strategy is forcing mistakes from your opponent. And I think with Gerald's opening, that was kind of trying to do that, right? Getting 2 Adepts across the map, getting the double Stargate for the double Oracle, rather, out of the Stargate. Just trying to force some mistakes, get some probe kills, do some damage. But Trigger did not make those defensive mistakes. He was buttoned up tight back at home. Able to take the win off the back of that. This map's kind of interesting. I could see some very cheeky stuff happening on this map. And already, what is Trigger doing? Oh, this is a position right here. If you wanted a proxy here. So it looks like this is just a 5 mineral patch, so mining through it's very easy. And then the probe can just come down here. I could absolutely see some big time proxies right down in this base. That's a ladder move if I've ever seen one. Gerald drops the pylon up on the top corner of the map, but it's not really being used for anything at the moment. Trigger is going for the 1 base Stargate, but so far, keeping those buildings in his base. The sneaky probe. The sneaky probe gonna come in after those Adepts leave and see what is up. Adepts fighting a Stalker here. It's good news for Gerald, though. That means he knows what's coming. Oh, and he's gonna catch these Adepts. They're gonna try to run up into the main base, but Gerald 2 on top of it. The recall goes down, but one of those adepts dies. The second one gets away. That's not particularly worth it for Trigger. And unfortunately for Trigger, Gerald has scouted the entire base and knows exactly what he's up against. As I say that, though, Trigger drops the Robo. All on one base. Who needs a second base? Certainly not Trigger. Seal Pup, thank you so much for the resubscription. 42 months. Oh my god. Answer to life, the universe, and everything is Seal Pup, actually. Welcome back, my friend. Thank you. Now, the Oracle here from Trigger is going to be able to scout that there is a Nexus on the way for Gerald. He's gone for the expansion. He's going into Blink. Gerald is playing a very standard game, but he just scouted that there's no base, and while he killed the probe that could have been ready to put it down, and actually, it seems like Trigger is going to take that base. I don't know. This is feeling kind of wild from Trigger. He's now going for the Twilight Council, but this is all on a one-base economy. And that means Trigger's just not going to have much army at all for a while. Trying to get into his own Blink with that Robo up, the Stargate as well. And none of this has really gotten anything done. Oh, except for catching 3 Stalkers, I guess, but not the biggest deal in the world at this point. Just kind of funny. Yeah, there just hasn't been much happening here for Trigger so far. It's a lot of money to invest for basically 0 damage. That being said, Immortal's going to be very strong. We'll see if Gerald's able to take advantage of the fact that his Blink is quite a bit earlier than Trigger's. So he's going to have a big period of time of having those Blink Stalkers versus non-Blink Stalkers. That both players are going for some sneaky adepts. There were some adepts out for Gerald. Where do they go? Oh, there they are. They're hiding down there on that mini-map. They're just waiting, biding their time. Well, the Blink Stalker's going to jump on these. We'll grab one of those adepts. Trigger going to have to pull the other one home. But that means those Blink Stalkers aren't going to attack him anytime soon, and that's good for Trigger. As I say that, Gerald groups everything together and starts heading out. Both players do have third bases on the way. Trigger's getting into a forge before Gerald. Oh, but where's Trigger going? He needs to hang out up here. He's spotting these Stalkers. He knows they're coming. I love the stasis wards here. These could be absolutely massive. Gerald does not have vision, and oh my god. Just about every single Stalker gets caught in that stasis ward. The Adepts are sneaking in at the same time, but it doesn't look like they're getting much damage, at least for the time being. One of them might be able to sneak into the main base. There's no shield battery in this mineral line, actually, so this Adept can get some damage done. Trigger will chase the army out. Well, I see a couple probes getting killed on this side as well, as Trigger also got some Adepts in. A few probes going down on each side before the Adepts are handled. Trigger is down a good bit of army supply right now. It's a little hard to say in PvP exactly, I don't know, where the army supply lies, because a lot of it depends on your warp gate cycle and how often you're warping in units. And a lot of times I'll look, I'll be like, whoa, he's like 12 supply behind. And then he just does a warp in round and all of a sudden it's dead even supply. All right, well, maybe not quite that far. And as we see, Trigger has caught up, but then Gerald will warp in units. I don't know. Both players have +1 on the way at the same time. Overall, I'd say this is a very even game for the time being. Both players getting a few hits here and there. But, I mean, really, not much action in this game. It's been a lot of, like, almost action. Oh, and that Oracle gonna be able to kill that probe, scout this base. The base does go down. Trigger also taking that base. Very interesting choice. So I haven't seen too many longer games on this map. Interesting to see both of these Protosses go for the low ground behind the mineral wall 4th base rather than this 4th base, especially since, you know, they're both going on the same side of the map. But I guess they took the bases at very similar times, so they wouldn't necessarily have known that. Gerald is looking to come in here and get some damage done. Blinks one stalker forward just in case. He's going to try to force the cancel, but the counter blink. He goes for the cancel anyways. He is going to force the cancel. No, he gets the kill and then goes for the recall. Trigger ends up losing a Nexus, but man, he just killed a lot of stalkers. And that might be the key for Trigger to head across the map. That was 7 stalkers going down. And suddenly Trigger does take the army supply lead, at least for a moment there. Gerald's going to have to defend his own base. But of course, he should be able to have a couple of shield batteries up, at least in a moment here. Trigger dives forward, realizes there's a little more than he had expected. Sending some zealots across, but I saw some Dark Templar warping in. So Gerald going to be trying to sneak into bases, and oh no, there's no cannons around for Trigger. These 3 zealots have a lot of work to do. I don't think they're going to be able to get it done. Oh, and this is going to be so much DT damage as they are just sneaking right on into the base. Trigger is trying to hit the front at the same time, but Gerald with the shield battery, with a couple of Immortals and the Blink Stalkers here is just... he's too solid defensively. And 8 probes are going down in the bases here for Trigger. DT still chasing these units around. There's so many probes here. This DT is like frothing at the mouth at the thought of killing every single one of these probes. Already gets 3 more of this DT. Up to 7 kills before it gets sniped. That's a lot of damage, though. We see Trigger taking a big deficit in the worker count right now. And that's allowed Gerald to, I mean, not only catch up, but jump way ahead. While Trigger was busy dealing with that, Gerald was just warping in units. And now with the superior economy, we'll be able to maintain this supply lead. I'm getting real worried here for Trigger, who's down 40 supply. Gerald already has a couple of disruptors out, and Trigger just has the Robo Bay about halfway done, as well as the second Robo. DT Blink is on the way. Trigger does have the potential to get into some Dark Templar, but on a lower worker count without those disruptors out, it's very dangerous to try to do that. You know, Gerald is ahead, and if Gerald pushes while some DTs are getting warped in by Trigger, that could be a real big problem. That was a nice Archon morph and recall there. Gerald reactively doing that after seeing those units getting hit. Just like, oh, they'll be better as an Archon. Kind of like Tastosis, you know? They were walking in there one at a time. They were getting hit by the Stalkers. And they were like, this will be better, actually, if we just join forces. We all know that was the case. They were right. It's kind of interesting. I haven't seen a lot of action in the middle of the map, and that doesn't surprise me too much. This area in particular is just so higgledy-piggledy, you know what I mean? There's so much not good pathing that can happen in there. Dangerous place to go. Trigger finally taking this gold base. Gerald's is, it's not quite running, but it is fully up, fully armed battle station. And Trigger trying to poke in, but Gerald is so solid on the defense here. And this just feels like Gerald's game to lose now. My biggest concern for him would be waiting too long to fight until Trigger gets maxed as well, or eating a massive Disruptor Nova. No, Gerald. Oh my God. 6 Stalkers going down, and just like that, Trigger's actually back into this game. Now it's still not a great position for him, and he's gonna back up and let Gerald take this high ground, let him force the cancel on that base. And while that start to the fight was so good for Trigger, he didn't feel like he could keep it up. There's just too many disruptors here for Gerald. Disruptor Nova's going off on both sides. Gerald wins that disruptor battle. Oh, big blink forward there from Trigger. Doesn't eat too many losses, though. disruptors so far not finding nearly as much damage as that first one did for Trigger. I love the disruptor battles here. Woo, blink forward. Wow, the splits are so good. You guys know what they're doing. Gerald, though, warping in a bunch of DTs on this side of the map. Oh, these units are right here, but the observer took the shortcut, and so the units aren't going to actually see the DTs. Oh, no. Oh, Trigger. It was such a good plan. Foiled by the observer being able to fly. If only observers just walked around. And that's going to be another cancel here. And while these DTs might be able to get taken down, I think this is already good enough for Gerald. And yeah, he's just going to be able to blink out of there. He's taking a 6th base while Trigger desperately tries to double expand. Kind of roaming around each other here. Observers getting sniped is pretty huge because vision is so important in these kinds of fights. Gerald maybe trap Trigger a little bit here, but no, Trigger backs up. Doesn't need any big novas. This has allowed Trigger to equalize the supply though. As we see, both players are very near to maxed. And while Gerald obviously has a much larger bank, there can be some snowball potential if you're able to take a very good fight. That's easier said than done against this many disruptors, though. DTs are, I think, losing that fight, so they're going to run away. This little group of units here from Trigger is going to get caught and killed. But now Gerald has showed his hand. He's moving across, and oh, there's some moving across on both sides here. Trigger decides to go for a little base trade action, but he is poised to lose his 3rd with a lot of probes at it, and he just killed the 6th of Gerald. It's not quite the same kind of damage so far, but Trigger continues moving in. He's going to take down this base as well, and so far Gerald hasn't actually done anything, but he finally kills that base. Oh, we got a mothership from Trigger. He goes for the strategic recall on the new mothership. Did leave a few units behind that got cleaned up, and this base didn't end up going down. Gerald now trying to trim off some of the health of this base, maybe something he can get. Oh, and it looks like he might be able to get it from this side as Trigger's army has moved all on this left side, allowing some stalkers, some DTs, even a disruptor to dive in here and get this kill. Whoa, oh! There is detection. Down it goes. A couple of carriers coming out for Trigger, but 1 or 2 carriers is like the worst amount of any unit to ever have. And Trigger loses 2 of his bases. He only killed 1 of Gerald's. And while he does still have a nice fresh base here, and a nice fresh base here, economically that is not great for Trigger. Gerald also joining the fight in the air, but going for the Tempest instead of the carriers. Carriers have, you know, more DPS. They're a bit chunkier, but they come with the downfall of range, and those Tempests, they have plenty of range. This has become such a close game. I mean, still Gerald is so far ahead. Look at that huge bank. I love that he's putting down some cannons and shield batteries. I think that's such a great choice. It makes it so much harder for Trigger to attack in. And it's something Trigger absolutely doesn't have the money for right now, to set up like a ton of static defense. He does have some at this base, but you know, he's not setting up a whole line of it outside this base just yet. Tempest do have to be a bit careful. They're still a bit slow. And if those Stalkers get a chance, they will blink underneath them and just absolutely crush them. The thing about Tempest is they're actually just a terrible unit by themselves, but they can slowly chip away at the enemy, and that can be a very powerful thing. Now, Trigger has split his army very significantly. Trying to hold on over here with the carriers, a few disruptors, and the mothership. He sent a lot of stalkers and a couple of archons over on this side to try to get some damage done here. Right now, he's just going to go for the Stargates. Super Shield Battery turned on and try to hold on. But these are +3 attack stalkers. They're going to chew through that very quickly. But Gerald is back, and he is bringing his whole force, all of his might. Recall goes down. Trigger trying to get some of these units out of there. Whoa, disruptors, getting the disruptors. When your Novas hit their disruptors, it's a good feeling. But Gerald's still going to lose this base. He's just going to move across the map. Oh, he's going for it. Good snipe on the observer there for Gerald. Means these DTs can't really do too much because there is detection for Gerald. Trigger trying to maybe figure out what he wants to do. He already used a recall, so he can't use that right now. I guess it's base trade time. After such a long game, there's a big lead from Gerald earlier. He still has so much more money right now. Oh, the Tempests are coming home. They're trying to pick off some of these units. Right now, they're just focusing on the interceptors, but they're going to tag down one of those carriers, get it pretty low. They pull back to the shield batteries. Oh, and the Zealots doing so much work here. There's the cloaking field. Mothership is going to fall. And the Zealots, I think, are going to clean up this ground. The carriers can't hold on their own, and it looks like Trigger's army is getting dismembered. He still has a handful of units back at home, and if we look at the supply, Gerald has gone down to 37 workers, and he is just replacing this with army up to 141 army supply. His army supply is dwarfing that of his opponent. He has spent a lot of his bank, but he still has more, and he's still putting down these fresh bases. He's going to move across the map, and I just don't think there's going to be enough here for Trigger, even with some decent Disruptor Novas, even with the Super Shield Battery, which is now depowered. Gerald is pushing through, and Trigger's economy is so bad behind. There's a big Disruptor Nova, and that might be enough to seal the deal here, losing that base. Trigger's going to stick with it. I mean, he knows he got some damage done. Gerald doesn't have a lot of mining right now. He's effectively on like a base and a half, but Trigger isn't on anymore. Until this base finishes, Trigger's mining's pretty bad as well. And we do have some Zealots and DTs hitting over here. But it is Gerald with the defensive observer. Going to allow him to see the enemy DTs, and he is just going to move out and kill these. Another win for Gerald. There's no static defense at this base anymore. Shield battery is going down, but the cannon hasn't even started yet. At the same time, Gerald's starting to move in over here. Is where the majority of Trigger's army is, but it's still, oh my god, it's so much smaller than Gerald's. Look at this, 67 to 153 army supply. I think we're going to a game 3. Trigger is fighting his heart out right now, but I just don't think it's in the cards. He is traded pretty significantly worse than Gerald. Gerald's economy is starting to get very good again. Well, I don't want to say very good. He's got fresh bases. He's only on 41 workers. That actually means his economy is pretty bad, but his army is massive. He is at over double the army supply of Trigger. And while Trigger has some good units still, he's still got some disruptors. He's got a few Tempests. And we're getting to the point where the Tempest of Gerald might just be able to win this game. 12 Tempests to 4 and 9 Stalkers. Plus the Disruptor Nova is just trimming off some units here. Trigger absolutely can't afford to be losing those, but it might be too little too late. Gerald is playing very timidly, and this is what got Trigger back to an okay position earlier on. Was Gerald just kind of chilling. Now I think Gerald has realized what kind of advantage he has here as he builds more Tempests. He's getting that Tectonic Destabilizers upgrade as well, even winning the Disruptor Nova battles. Trigger is holding on for dear life here. Novas come forward from Gerald. He just throws them all out, keeps pushing this army back. Any trades Gerald takes here are good. He just needs to be killing Trigger's stuff. Trigger's economy is not great, and he doesn't have a bank, and he doesn't have a ton of army supply. Gerald just needs to be killing stuff, and that's exactly what he's doing. Super Shield Battery helping out a good bit. But these Tempests are they're just crushing it. Now the defensive DTs from Trigger are going to help out. Now the Stalkers are chasing the Tempest. Like I said, they're not great in a straight up fight, but the reinforcement Stalkers here out of Gerald are going to push Trigger back. And as Trigger falls under 100 supply, down to 24 army supply, GG does get called. And Gerald ties the series up 1-1. We can go to a game 3 here shortly. Gonna be on Solaris. Does Twitch want to work yet? No? Doesn't want to work yet. Too bad. Gerald needs just a second. But there we go. Loading in. Counting down. Don't mind me, just energizing a little bit. Didn't get a lot of sleep last night. Stayed up a little bit too late. I had to work at 7 a.m. this morning, and you know that feeling when you wake up to the like 6:15 alarm, and you just hate life a little bit. That's kind of what I was feeling this morning. It was a rough one. Getting out of bed was a struggle this morning. We've made it here though, and I'm happy to finally be at the casting StarCraft portion of my day. So we get into game number 3, spawning in the lower left-hand corner of Solaris. It is Basilisk's Trigger, who took the short game, game 1. His opponent in the upper right-hand corner for Sizestorm Gaming. He took the long game. It's Gerald. What does that mean? Honestly, I think Gerald has played so much PvP, and I'm sure Trigger has played quite a bit as well. But I feel like Trigger has maybe a slightly wider range of opponents he gets to face on the ladder. I think he probably plays a decent amount of EU ladder rather than NA. But the EU GM ladder around Gerald's MMR is very Protoss heavy, and you know, we've seen him up against a lot of Protosses a lot of times. He's very good at PvP, and European Protosses tend to play a lot more macro than NA or Korean Protosses. So I wonder if Trigger just doesn't have as many macro PvP games under his belt. I wouldn't be surprised if Gerald was just a little bit stronger because of that as the game gets later. And Gerald's Blink Micro has always been very, very good too. I think Gerald underestimates himself. He's a very strong player. We've seen him take down some top tier names in the past, and it's no mistake. Worth noting, Gerald won the second most amount of Cock of the Walks, which is the weekly tournament that I used to run back in the old days. Some of you in chat may be old enough to remember the days of the Cock of the Walk. Oh, that reminds me. There's a whiskey that apparently we sell at the store I work at. It's called Fighting Cock Whiskey. And I absolutely need to buy a bottle just to have. I've heard of it before, but I didn't realize we sold it at my store. And my coworker got some and was like, you need to see the name of this. And I was like, oh, that's my jam. That's what I've been looking for. Now we just need to get sponsored by them. Although I think on Twitch, you can't have sponsorships by alcohol companies, which is a bit unfortunate. You know, I was thinking about it. So I've been watching football. These stalkers interact a little bit in the speedy field. I kind of love the speed fields here. Oh my god, it's so fun to watch. Great micro on both sides, though. It's so difficult to micro in those speed zones, but almost a dead even trade. Slightly more health lost on Trigger's stalkers, but man, such good micro on both sides there. And the trade's just pretty much straight down the middle, even with the speed zone making things a little bit funky. Anyways, I watch a lot of football, American football, and you know, it's always sponsored by Bud Light or Coors Light or whatever mediocre to crappy American beer is sponsoring football. The official beer of the NFL. Or Miller Lite? I don't know. There's a few. The point is, the NFL's sponsored by a bunch of alcohol companies. Where's our esports sponsored by alcohol companies? I feel like if any esport could handle being sponsored by alcohol, it would be StarCraft. Because there are so many of us that are like over 30 that would just be totally chill with buying a bottle of alcohol because it helps StarCraft. You know what I mean? I feel like StarCraft could really benefit from an alcohol-based sponsorship. That's my opinion. I don't know how you guys feel about it. On one hand, I'm not a huge fan of alcohol advertisements, and a lot of the StarCraft audience is not in the US. So I think alcohol ads are much less of a thing in Europe. It's definitely a very US thing to have lots of alcohol ads. But I don't know. It just feels like one of those things that would work for us, for our community specifically. Trigger running straight across the map with his stalkers, a couple of sentries as well, so Gerald has to be careful of the force field potential. He's going to try to trim up one of the sentries. He gets it. Now it's a little bit of blink micro on both sides, except for one problem. Gerald doesn't have blink yet. He's waiting 10 seconds, and Trigger has recognized this. So he chases him back a little bit. Trigger going to blink on top of Gerald, but Gerald has blink now, and oh, he's dodging some stalker shots, pulling the weak stalkers back up on the high ground as well. And while that fight started out really nice for Trigger, ultimately I think that was actually better for Gerald. Slight trade win here for Gerald. Trigger tries to come in and get a little bit more damage, but he's got to be careful. This is great use of the map by Gerald, chasing these stalkers away, using that high ground to his advantage. And now the speed zone's helping him out a little bit as well as he chases the stalkers back. And Trigger takes a big dip in the army supply, 29-15. This is looking like a very nice game for Gerald so far. More stalkers warping in for Trigger, but he doesn't have a shield battery here. It's very dicey. He does have some vision, though. The observer can be very useful. Oh, that army supply lead is so big for Gerald, but of course he doesn't know exactly what the numbers are. He sees some stalkers, but there might be some he doesn't see. He doesn't have the perfect vision we have. Imagine if you did. Maybe we should run a tournament where you get to see, like, should we run like a hack tournament? Where you get to see the production tab of your opponent or like their supply. They're like limited information of your opponent, but more than you'd get in a normal game. You just get to see this, their worker supply and army supply. You get to see that. Or you get to see the production tab, or you get to see the mini-map. You don't get all three, but you get to choose which one you want to see in a game. I'm glad to see some support in chat for the idea of sponsoring StarCraft events with alcohol. I just think it's one of those like untapped markets. And I mean, I'll be real with you guys. I don't like ads. I don't like that advertisement is what makes the world go round and where all the money comes from for these kinds of things. But the reality of it is that is where all the money comes from. That's why we have any StarCraft tournaments, because advertisers want eyes on their things. Maybe that's where we come in, you know? We got to make it happen. Trigger's trying to make it happen right now. Ooh, but this is kind of a weird start to the fight. Gerald diving on top of this. There are some reinforcements coming from the left for Trigger, but they're getting caught up. War Prism here for Gerald and for Trigger. They're both trying to just warp in more units. Hard to tell who's winning. The supplies are still so close. No shield battery here for Gerald at all, so it is just a straight fist fight to the face, and Trigger seems to be winning. Maybe focusing down a couple of stalkers here and there. God, it's so hard to tell who's winning those Stalker Zealot fights. The Zealots are just running all over each other, and now this fourth base from Gerald seems to be not happening. But on the plus side, for Gerald, Trigger also just doesn't have a fourth base. So Gerald, he's down a bit of army supply, but it is still even economy with his opponent. If he can keep holding on here, utilizing some shield batteries to his advantage, maybe overcharging at some point, just to try to hold on a little bit longer and get some more warp-ins going. Maybe he can snipe the Prism and force Trigger to pull back. But right now, Trigger has a lot more stuff on the field. He's up 15 army supply, and he's going to start diving in. There's the overcharge on the shield battery. Trigger immediately disengages, pulling the Prism back too, canceling some warp-ins. So, super shield battery working out for Gerald, and he very, very luckily kept this base alive. And that's a problem for Trigger. He can't just leave now. If he had killed that third base, he could go home and take his own fourth. Or if he killed the fourth, rather. But he didn't. He killed some probes, and he's killing some more now. But now, Gerald is pushing down the ramp. He's got some nice force fields. Those are beautiful force fields. Zealot's getting really, really trapped here. This is not a very good fight for Trigger. He killed 19 probes, but the army supplies are a lot closer than they were just a minute ago. And suddenly it feels like Gerald might be able to hang in this game a little bit longer. Trigger doesn't have that overwhelming army supply lead. And Zealots are just running in and dying immediately. The Stalkers doing their best, but a lot of Trigger Stalkers aren't firing. Same is true on Gerald's side, though. A lot of them are just herp-derping around as he gets blinked back. And look at that concave Trigger has. That was not a great fight for Gerald. It started out okay. But we do see Trigger maintaining that army supply lead, continuing to warp in. Gerald is building more probes. He's trying to get his probe count back up. Again, he does still have this base alive. If he can get to mining from it at any point, maybe it would be worthwhile. But Trigger seems to be in a very dominant position here. He's up on top of the ramp. Guys, he has the high ground. Oh, no. Anakin. Don't try it, Anakin. Gerald telling Trigger he underestimates his power, but I don't know if Gerald believes that. He's down a lot of army supply. He's down to 78 total supply right now. Shield battery gets picked off. And Trigger, I think he's just in too dominant of a position here. Gerald's going to try to find a way in, but Trigger is ready for him. Oh no, Gerald blinks forward. He gets the Prism, but at what cost? It cost him everything. And as the last of the Stalkers go down, it looks like Trigger is going to take the 2-1 victory here over Gerald. GG.